The Newsday continues here on One News Now Business. I'm Diego Castro. Here are the biggest stories on the economic and corporate fronts. The country's dollar reserves fell to $99.3 billion at end of February. Citing preliminary data, the Bangko Sentral says gross international reserves slipped by 1.4% from the $100.67 billion in January. The latest figure is also 7.9% lower than the $107.8 billion logged in February of 2022. The Bangko Sentral says the GIR level slipped as government settled foreign currency debt obligations. The BSP also says the downward adjustments in the value of its gold holdings contributed to the lower GIR. Manibela says Malacanang has agreed not to immediately phase out traditional jeepneys. Manibela Chairman Mar Valbuena told the Big Story that the palace vowed to order concerned agencies to review the guidelines for PUV modernization. Manibela and other transport groups ended their planned week-long strike after their meeting with Malacanang officials on Tuesday.
So yung napag-usapan, klaro naman po doon na hindi mapipace out kasi yun po ang pinarating ng ating Pangulo at yung isang taon na palugit na ibibigay, hindi lamang po ito para doon sa pagko-consolidate kundi para pag-aralan po ulit at i-revisit po yung department order na Omnibus Franchising Guidelines.
President Bongbong Marcos assured PUV drivers and operators of enough time for dialogues to ensure that their livelihood won't be compromised.
Ang problema na kanilang sinasabi ay baka hindi sila mapautang para makapagbili ng bagong sasakyan. Kaya yan ang tinitignan namin ngayon, na tiyakin na walang mawawalan ng trabaho dahil hindi nakapagbili ng electric vehicle pagdating ng panahon.
Unemployment and underemployment rates in the country both saw increases in the month of January. According to preliminary data from the Philippine Statistics Authority, the number of jobless Filipinos slightly rose to 4.8% in January. That's equivalent to 2.37 million Filipinos. The January figure is higher than the 4.3% or 2.22 million Filipinos in December. Meanwhile, the underemployment rate rose to 14.1% in January. This means 6.65 million Filipinos wanted to work longer hours or an additional job for more income. That's more than 12.6% of 6.2 million Filipinos tallied in the month of December last year. We'll be back with more stories after the break. Keep it here on One News. You're still watching One News Now. I'm Diego Castro. Soured loans held by Philippine banks increased for the first time in 10 months in January. Data from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas show that bad loans reached 405 billion pesos in January. This brought the industry's non-performing loan ratio to 3.28%, inching up from 3.16% in December. Some economists said rising inflation and interest rates may have started to impact the capacity to pay of some consumers and firms. Loans are classified as non-performing when they are left unpaid for at least 90 days beyond the due date. Meralco is set to implement staggered increase in generation charges. The power distributor said around 1.1 billion pesos will be collected over a 2-month period. This will result in an increase of 62 centavos per kilowatt hour in its total rate for March and April 2023. Meralco said price hikes wholesale electricity spot market contributed to the expected increase. Metro Pacific Investments Corporation reported a 15% jump in its consolidated core net income in 2022. MPIC's income rose 14.2 billion pesos from 12.3 billion pesos a year earlier. The company attributed this to the recovery of toll road traffic and growth in power consumption, in line with the reopening of the economy and the presidential elections last year. For 2023, MPIC is targeting to grow its income by another 15%. MPIC is also earmarking 80 billion pesos for capital expenditure this year, slightly higher than what the company spent in 2022. The company says about 10% of the capex will be set aside for its 2 agribusiness acquisitions.
It's close to about 8 billion on agri. The projects and the programs that we will go into would really depend on the partnership with the LR Group for the hydroponics, for example, in the dairy farms that Sila Juvie are doing right now. There are also certain acquisitions that we cannot disclose at this point. The rest of the MPIC Group, it's going to aggregate at about almost 80 billion. And the biggest chunk of which obviously would come from power. And then next would be the toll roads, given their existing projects that need to be completed. I think the plan is to complete half in 23 and the next half in 2024.
South Korea has mapped out plans to become a major space player by the year 2045. Bloomberg gets an exclusive and unprecedented tour of the NATO Space Center, whose giant leap into space started with a small step on the internet. Let's watch this.
South Korea has lofty goals for its fledgling space program that needed one giant leap of faith in a search engine to get it off the ground. Treaties between established space powers like the US, Russia, and France prohibit certain tech transfers to aspiring space club nations like South Korea, leaving its small team of pioneering rocket scientists to scour the web for ideas.
We looked up on the internet to compare and find a suitable launch vehicle. What caught our eye was the SpaceX Falcon Merlin engine. We developed Nuri, looking at the picture and using it as a point of reference to design.
Kerosene is a fuel tank.
This is an actual Nuri 3-stage launch vehicle, not a replica. And Bloomberg News got an exclusive and unprecedented tour of the entire Naro Space Center, where the first 2 Nuri rockets were launched, including the first successful test mission last year.
What did you feel when it launched for the first time?
My heart is beating fast too.
And praying, please.
Pray.
The next launch, perhaps by as early as this May, will deploy actual commercial satellites, powered into orbit by those SpaceX-inspired but locally made engines, and they're nearly 300 tons of thrust.
We're trying to build a SpaceX-like company.
It's a model that marries Elon Musk's cost efficiencies with South Korea's prowess in advanced chips. At present, the Nuri costs about $80 million per launch, compared to $67 million for the more powerful, larger payload Falcon 9. That's largely why later this year, South Korea's government-run KARI will transfer its commercial rocket launching to a private company, rocket engine maker Hanwha Aerospace.
We're seeking to see if Hanwha can make this Nuri rocket profitable, but it's a very hard task. Elon Musk has made a very tight market for other companies.
This is South Korea's main launch center and launch pad for the last 2 Nuri rockets and the next one that will be launched sometime later in 2023. But over here, they're going to expand it because they have larger ambitions for destinations further afield, including the moon and beyond. And liftoff of Artemis 1.
Namely, participation in the NASA-led Artemis program to return man and payloads to the moon. National security, too, will be a key driver at a time when North Korea is improving its rocket capabilities, and a sanctioned Russia means one less rocket launch provider available to South Korea.
중요하게는 이제
It's important to find cheap launch vehicles from a business perspective, but I think it is very important for the country to have the ability to put satellites or things like this into space when we want to.
To get into the once fairly exclusive but now increasingly crowded Global Space Club, South Korea may emulate another American accomplishment, the Kennedy Space Center, to transform these sleepy islands in the nation's south into an aerospace industry epicenter. Stephen Engel, Bloomberg News at the Naro Space Center, Gohong, South Korea.
And those are the top business stories of the hour. I'm Diego Castro. Join us again at 2 p.m. We are One News. All sides, all the time.